So today I want to talk about proxies. Now this is a video that I had promised a long time ago when I was making my video on Reflect. So sorry for the wait about that, but here it is. So proxies, what are they? Well, if you've ever worked with getters and setters, proxies are similar to that, but it's like getters and setters on steroids that are enhanced with extra features. It's a way that you can build something that's going to intercept any requests for properties or the values of properties, or if you want to update a property, or if you want to call another function. This is going to act like an interceptor. It's going to be something in between. So the person makes the call and says, hey, give me the value of that thing. You can do data validation on it. You can return a completely different property. You can throw errors from this thing. Lots and lots of possibilities. So basic syntax, let's jump into that. That'll make things a lot more clear. I have a basic object right here, and I'm going to create a handler object. And this object right here, my handler, this is where I'm going to put the code. So there's going to be inside of here a property called get, and this is going to be a function. And there's going to be another property called set. I don't have to have both, but usually you will have both things. So like I said before, a getter and a setter. And we create the proxy by calling new proxy. And then we pass in the object that we want to be monitoring, this one right here. And then the handler, this is the trap. This is the thing that's capturing the calls. The person is going to be working with this object right here, the proxy object. So that's the one that you would publicly expose and get people to use in the code, or you would use in the code, is the proxy object. Inside the get and the set, we have a few properties that are going to be passed in here for us. The target, this is going to be the object right here. There's going to be prop. So what property are you talking about? What one you're trying to get or set? There's a third property, which actually the MDN documentation for new proxy itself for calling this method doesn't even mention in the example the fact that there's this third property. That's how little it's used. But it is there. The receiver is going to be a reference to the proxy object itself. Let's copy that over here. So same thing in get and set. We've got target, property, and receiver. So target and property, those are the two things that we're going to work with. And the get is the trap whenever you try to retrieve the value. So here I'm calling proxy.prop. Now right now, this code is doing nothing at all. And if my handler, I'm going to temporarily remove these. Let's just comment them out. If I were to run this code right now, I get the original values. My handler is an empty object. So the request for prop1 and prop2, they're just a pass through. They just go directly to the original object and get those values. Now with my get and set up here, we're going to intercept. We're going to trap the call for these things. Let's do the get first. We can say that I want to retrieve. So I'm going to check and make sure when somebody asks me for a property, I'm going to look and see, hey, inside that original object, do I have something by that name? Does it exist? If so, great, I'm going to return it. So we can say return target prop. Else, I can return something else. I can return something, I can throw an error. So I'm just going to, right now, return a message like that. Now down here, I'm asking for prop1, prop2. I'm going to change this to prop1 and prop3. Prop3 does not exist currently inside of here. There's only prop1 and prop2. So I should see prop1 come back, the hello, and then I should see no such property. There we are. So hello and no such property. So we're intercepting this, and we can figure out whether or not there was something there, or maybe there's some default value. So in my handler, it doesn't really matter what it is. I can do this. So I can return something like that. And there it is. So my handler can have default values to use as fallbacks if I want. Or we can I'm going to throw an error. So instead of returning a value, I'm going to throw an error. And my error is going to be no such prop. Same sort of idea, just a different way of doing this. And here it's going to come up. I could wrap, there's my type error. I could wrap the call to this inside of a try catch. And then in my catch, I would get that error and I could deal with it, do whatever I want with it. But you can see with the get, we're getting the ability to start checking these things. And maybe before I return an actual property, what I want to do is I want to say, okay, if it does exist, I want to do something to it. So I'm going to take the value and I'm going to capitalize it. So we could just take this value. We could check to see if it's a number or a letter, a string or a number rather. Let's comment this one out because we don't want that error. There we are. We've capitalized the value coming back. Same idea over in set. We can check to see if we want, if prop in target. Maybe I want to simulate what you would do with object seal. So I'm preventing new properties from being added. So if the property exists, fine. I'm going to say, we're just going to return true. Yeah, go ahead and do that. If it doesn't exist inside there, maybe I want to throw an error. Maybe I'm going to, yeah, the return the error is probably the best thing to do here. And to make the set run, instead of just running these values out like we're doing here, we actually would do something like this. So proxy.prop1, and let's do something entirely new for that. And then for a property that does not exist, there we go. So we've updated property 1, but property 3, we're getting the error back to say, hey, you cannot update a property that does not exist. So we're sort of replicating what you would do with object.seal to prevent things being added to an object. Okay, so there's the basic syntax. We've got get, we've got set. There are also a few other methods. You can check, you can build a trap for has, for delete property. You can build one for functions. Now, for functions, right here, if I was building a trap for functions, I can't pass in an object that has functions inside of it and do that. I actually have to pass in the function itself, and then the handler is going to have a property inside of it called apply, and that apply is going to be the function. This one doesn't get used as much, but it is there. I will leave a little sample of it in the file here. If you look down in the description, there's a link to the code gist that has all the code from this video, and I'll leave a little example of the function inside that one. Alright, so that's the basic syntax. Now I'm going to just comment all of this out and move that down a little bit. Get into a second example. You can, if you want, like right now, my object is in the same scope as my handler and my proxy. If I wanted to actually go into the object, I can do it. It's only if I go through the proxy, like we were right here, that I'm actually getting into that object and doing things to it. If I just directly access obj.prop1 or prop2, I am dealing with that original object. So there's going to be cases where you want to protect that original object. You don't want to do something. We can use an IFI, immediately invoked function expression, one of these things, where inside of it, I'm going to run a function that takes an object and puts it inside of there. So let's say my obj that I get back, this is going to be the proxy. I'm not going to see the original one. So if I took this and I passed it in to my iffy, this is my function like this, and it is going to accept, let's just call it my obj. This object right here is going to be passed into this variable, and then inside of here, what I'm going to return is my proxy. And it's going to take that object, and then there's going to be the handler. And what I'm returning is the proxy. So this is going to be the proxy for this object. Inside of here, we'd create our handler, same as we did before. We'd have our get with the target and the prop. We'd have our set function with the target and prop as well, same as we did in the original examples. Just like that. And then you can return whatever it is that you want. So this is a way that you can use a wrapper immediately invoked function expression to protect the original object. So another possible syntax for you is doing that. One more practical example, something that I think will be of value if you're struggling still to understand when or why you would want to do this. Well, JSON data is something that we'll often retrieve from an API. Maybe you want to do validation on that data as it's being brought in. So we can do that with our proxies. I'm going to create here something called objects. Let's say that this is the data that came back from my server. So I've got a whole series of objects inside of here. Just to have some data, I'll say there's an ID and a name. There we go. So we have an array of objects. Let's say this was extracted from JSON. We did an API call, we brought back some JSON, used json.parse to turn it into this array of objects. So I have a variable, but maybe this variable is local in scope to my function. After my function is done, this variable gets thrown away, so I no longer have the original one. And that's fine. What I want to have is the proxy object. So we're going to do this. My objects, I'm going to overwrite them, or I can just create a new object and return that, a new array rather, and return that. But I'm going to overwrite it with this. And instead of obj, maybe each one of these, we'll call it a person. So I've got 3 people here, 1 person, 2 person, 3 person objects. I'm going to loop through them, and for each one of them, what I'm going to do is I'm going to return a new proxy object. So my new proxy object needs the person, that is the target that we're going to be dealing with, and then my handler. I don't have to have a variable, I can just put the handler object inside of here. Let me get rid of the comments there. So this object that I'm putting right here, this is my handler object. New proxy takes 2 arguments. The constructor takes the person, which is the target, and then it takes the handler object. And my get and my set method I'm just going to return true from here. I'm not going to do anything. Yep, that was updated. And for the get, here's where I want to do my validation. Let's say that we're going to add a property inside of here for age. And the age property, I'm going to accept certain numbers, but I'm not going to allow negative numbers, and I'm not going to allow numbers, let's say, that are over 130. So in cases like this, when I'm doing the validation, I need to decide what I'm going to do with these values. So my get, inside of here, I'm going to check and make sure that when somebody retrieves it, it seems like a reasonable number. It is a valid amount. So we do our first standard check to say if prop in target. So yes, I do have an age property. Now I'm going to say if target, if prop is age. So I'm looking to see that. Now I'm going to check. I can do another nested if or just a compound if statement here. If target prop is greater than 0 and target prop is less than 130. If all those things are good, or here, let's do this. Let's break this up into multiple if statements so we'll get a couple of steps. All right, so if the property that we want is inside of the target object, if that property is age, let's check to make sure that the property is greater than 0 or greater than equal to 0, and it's also less than 130 or less than and equal to 130. Let's say that's our valid range, 0 to 130. We're good. So we can return target prop. Else, what do we want to do at this point? Do we want to return null? Do we want to return undefined? Do we want to throw an error? So it's up to you how you want to handle this in your program, but I'm going to, in this case, say throw new range error. Something like that. All right, so I have what came from JSON. I'm looping through that with the map method. I'm going to return an array of proxy objects to this. This is going to be my array of proxies. And each one of them has a get where I'm going to test the age. When somebody asks me for the age, I'm going to check to make sure it's within this valid range. Now, to actually apply that test, what we would do is we take our array of proxies, and I'm going to just quickly loop through it. So for each person, what I want to do is have a try catch because I know I'm throwing an error. So let's do that example with the try catch, the one that I was talking about before. What do I need to try? All I need to try is access that. Let's say that's the only thing I want to validate. All I have to do is call this. I don't have to assign it to anything. I don't have to write it out inside of the console. I could, but all I have to do is that. JavaScript will evaluate this. If it's good, it moves on. If not, it's going to throw the error. And we can just simply console.log like this. So we should get 2 errors written out. Oh, I used a comma here, not a period. That's my error. So that's not the error that we wanted. There we go. Range error, it's too high or too low, too high or too low. So we are getting 2 errors back from here because we had 2 values that were not valid. And if we wanted, what we could do is we could set this to something else. Maybe we could set it to null or put it to a default value if we wanted. But for now, this really solves our problem. All right. So I hope you're getting a good sense of what proxies are and what proxies can do for us. And I was saying before I was going to leave some function syntax as well. I'll just paste a little bit here. I've got some from another file, so we'll do that. There we go. This is what it would look like. f is my proxy for some function. Here's the function that I'm passing in. So we've got a function, and this is my handler, and it has one property in here, the apply. This is what gets called instead of the original function. So this one is overriding this one. It's trapping the calls to this, and it's doing this. This could be some reference to some other function that you've got in your code. That function is no longer going to run. Your function here will run instead of it. So by applying the proxy, we're sort of trapping the call to the other one by running our own. And like I said, there are other methods in here. There's a has, there's a delete property, and there's a few others as well, but I will leave those to you. I will leave down in the description as well a link to the MDN documentation for Proxy, and you can see in the list in the left-hand side, in the left-hand menu, it has a whole bunch of properties that you can look at. But you will, especially when you first start out, be the get and the set. These are going to be the two functions that you work with the most. All right, so I hope that helps you out. I hope that helps you understand proxies. The reason I was referencing this in Reflect is we have an option here. Now, right now, I'm returning target prop. Reflect gives us another way of calling this. We can, instead of return target prop, we can return reflect.get. And the properties that it receives just happen to be the same properties that we have here. So we could do this. We could say arguments, and that is the arguments from the function right here, the get function. These things, even if we had the receiver in here, all three of those are going to be passed through. So we use the spread operator to grab those three things and pass them through. Or we can say return reflect get, and then target prop receiver, like this. So all three of these lines right here are doing the exact same thing. And this is why I did reflect first. Was reflect is something that you can use here. Reflect looks back on the target object, and it calls the get method to get the value of this property from this target object. All right, and I will leave it off there. If you have any questions about proxies, feel free to leave those in the comments. I will answer whatever I do have time for. And as always, thanks for watching.